Okay, so what are Trump's chances at this point? And he has options, but I'll say right now, none of them seem too promising. So, the first thing I wanted to talk about is the huge legal victory that everybody talks about is Trump getting ballots, mail-in ballots that were mailed in after the election. He's getting those set aside. There is a court order in place for them to set those aside. The problem with that is that again, Pennsylvania is the big state here, the biggest deal out of all of this. Georgia might be flipped by a recount. I don't know, what's Georgia sitting at? 65 to 55. Oh, wow. Biden pulled 10,000 ahead in Georgia? That's absurd. Yeah, that's definitely fraud. 10,000 ahead in Georgia. But Biden's 40,000 ahead in Pennsylvania, but out of 3 million votes. That's actually a small margin. 0.6%. So we have the mail-in ballots that they're setting aside. Now, according to NBC, most counties just ignored that court order and counted them anyways. And that was NBC who was reporting that. So, I mean, even NBC couldn't deny that was happening. The problem is, once that ballot is counted and it's put in with the general population of ballots, there's no way that you can uncount that ballot. That's why fraud in the United States is so easy, because we have a blind election. A blind election meaning you cannot trace a ballot back to an individual. And because of that, you cannot trace it back to fraud. You can't trace the ballot back to the envelope it was mailed in. You can't trace the ballot back to any kind of record of where it came from. And that's to protect voters. So it's actually a good system. I support it. I believe in it. The problem is that it makes our system vulnerable to fraud. And Democrats are very, very well aware of this vulnerability. Once a ballot is cast and it's put in with the general ballot population, once it's counted and put in with that general ballot population tabulated, you can't uncount it. You cannot uncount it, even if it was fraudulently cast. Even if you can prove it was fraudulently cast, you cannot uncount it. You can prosecute the person committing the fraud. You cannot uncount the ballots they fraudulently cast. As horrific as that sounds, that's just how it is, because we have blind elections. There's no way to trace a ballot back to an envelope or to a person who cast it. So that being said, the court order, so again, I believe they're actually counting the votes that came in after Election Day. The court order says after you count that vote, you put it aside separately. Only some of those were actually put aside. I guarantee you hundreds of thousands of ballots came in after Election Day. We have the Pennsylvania election site here. Nope, not there. It's saying there's still 58,000 mail-in ballots left. I can tell you, I've been watching this for the past 2 or 3 days. It was like 2 days after the election. There were like 136,000 mail-in ballots recorded by Pennsylvania. I go to bed, I wake up, it's back up to 175,000. And that was like 2 or 3 days after the election. Hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots are coming in after the election. But I would go out on a limb and say a vast majority of them were counted and put in with the general population of counted ballots. And because of that, even if Trump wins his case to have if he wins his case to have the ballots that came in after Election Day invalidated, those ballots that were cast and put in with the general population will still count, because you cannot uncount them. So the only ones that will basically be uncounted will be the ones that were distinctly set aside. And we know the Democrats don't like to follow the rules. They don't like to follow the law. They will do anything they can to cheat. So I guarantee you a vast majority of them were counted anyways. And so for that court order to actually make a difference in the election, the Democrats will have had to set aside. I mean, Biden's ahead 40,000, 41,000. Okay. He was 40,000 this morning. Of course, yeah, whatever. Trump was at 3,314,000 when I checked this morning, probably maybe an hour or 2 hours ago. Biden got another 1,000. Trump got 0. Of course, why not? Anyways, yeah, 41,000. So the Democrats will have had to have set aside probably 60, 70,000 at a minimum ballots that came in after Election Day. So my question to you is, do you think they actually did that? Because again, if they ignore the court order, what happens to them? Nothing. States don't bother to prosecute election fraud. They don't. Especially Democrat states, because they don't care. Because election fraud always benefits the Democrats. So Democrat states rarely, if ever, prosecute election fraud. So people who are court ordered to set aside mail-in ballots, what do you think they're going to do? Oh, okay, I don't care. I'm going to count it anyways. And once it's counted, you can't uncount it. So honestly, do you think the Democrats set aside 70,000 of those mail-in ballots that came in after Election Day? I would venture to say no. NBC says it's somewhere around a few hundred. I don't know how correct that is. NBC also claims that the ballots that are being set aside are not being counted. I disagree with that. If they're not being counted, you wouldn't have to set them aside. You would just not count them. You wouldn't even open them from the envelope. You would just... No, I think what they're doing is they're counting it anyways and then setting aside in a separate pile. So if Trump wins his case, they can go and remove those and uncount them. But I don't believe enough in the Democrats to believe they actually honestly set aside enough to change the results. So they talk about, oh, it's a huge legal win. Sure it is for next election. It's a victory for next election. For this election, I don't know if it can make it big enough a difference. Because, again, the Democrats don't care. They ignore court orders. What a shock. And they count them anyways. And, again, because we have a blind election, which is something I support and believe in, there's nothing you can do about it. Once it's counted, it's counted. Only thing you can do is prosecute the person who's ignoring the court order, and we know Democrat states aren't going to do that. So, again, nothing we can do about that. So I wouldn't bank too much on that. Personally, I would not bank too much on that. That is unlikely to change this election. So what else are Trump's other chances? Not much. I mean, so the next thing we can talk about is recounts. So I heard about this possible software glitch. If true, I would say that's Trump's biggest chance of changing this election, of swinging this election back in his favor. If there was a software glitch that was arbitrarily adding tallies to Biden's vote total, that would be Trump's best chance of altering this election. And I know there has to be something up, right? There's something fishy, because Pennsylvania went in. Biden gained the lead in Pennsylvania around Thursday or Friday. I don't remember exactly if it was Thursday or Friday. I think it was Friday. But they wouldn't call the election even though they knew a majority of the remaining votes were Biden's. They still wouldn't call the election because they were running I remember seeing news articles, justifying why they haven't called it yet. Right? Oh, because we have to be 99.9% certain before we call a state. No, they already knew. They didn't call it till Saturday because they knew everybody would be watching the news on Saturday. Because again, statistics suggest that people watch the news Saturday morning because they're not going to work. They have the day off, they wake up, they turn on the news. That's why they called it Saturday morning, because they wanted maximum exposure when they declared Biden as president-elect of the United States of America. The problem is the media doesn't declare the next president. They think they do. They don't. Because none of these votes have been validated. Technically the election is not over yet until all the votes are certified and the Electoral College has cast their votes. That's when it's actually over. It's not over yet. Technically, no, it's not over yet. But the media wants everyone to believe it's over and that Biden has already won. So when Trump does whatever it is he's going to do to alter the results of this election to swing it back in his favor, they're going to declare, well, Trump cheated. He invalidated the election through whatever means, right? Because Biden already won. We had millions of people watching the news Saturday when we declared Biden the winner, and they all know that Biden is the winner, and Trump cheated. And that's the only way he changed the results of this election. He's not really changing the results of the election because the election isn't over yet. These aren't results. These are projections. Right? We got to understand the difference between actual results and just a projection. And a projection is not official. As official as the media wants to believe they are, and a projection is not official. So if Trump turns this around and swings it back in his favor, the media is going to lie, and they're going to claim Trump changed the results of the election. And that's going to be 100% false, because the election, there are no results yet. Not until the votes are verified, and not until the Electoral College actually casts their votes. So no, just be aware of that, and that's why they waited till Saturday to call Pennsylvania. Because they wanted maximum exposure when they declared Biden the president of the United States of America. Which makes me suspect, because the media knows more than we do. They don't report everything they know. And they know more than we do. They know there's something out there that Trump can do to swing this back in his favor. Otherwise, they would have declared it on Thursday or Friday. They would have declared Biden the winner probably Thursday. They waited till Saturday because they wanted maximum exposure. Because they suspect Trump can swing this. So honestly, that gives me the greatest hope, seeing the media's fishy behavior like that. Waiting till Saturday to call the election. Because something's up. So, I'm going through options here. So recount is Trump's best option if there was a software glitch that was tabulating fake votes for Biden. Because again, you would have to do the recount by hand, and you would need a Republican and you would need a Democrat observer in the room watching that poll worker as he counts that ballot. Before he counts it, you need both observers to pass off on that ballot as valid, and you have to do the recount by hand. If it's a software glitch that's giving Biden extra votes and we recount it using software again, you have the same problem. Do a hand recount, Democrat and Republican observer in the room watching every poll worker in every ballot that gets counted. And then have the National Guard secure the building. I'm not even joking. Deploy the National Guard to Pennsylvania. Have them put concertina wire around these buildings to make sure trucks don't drive up at 3 in the morning and drop off 100,000 mysterious ballots that weren't there before. That no one comes in and tampers with the ballots at 2 or 3 in the morning when no one's watching. Secure these buildings. Only let people who are authorized in. Do not let packages in. Do not let trucks drive up. Do not let any of that. And I know that if Trump were to deploy the National Guard to oversee the election to make sure, or oversee the recounts to ensure that they were valid, that the media would freak out and the left would freak out and they'd cry, "Oh, tyranny." But, when President Lincoln was assassinated, John Wilkes Booth, that was his name, I believe. What is it? He said, "Semper sic tyrannis," right? Thus always to tyrants. He was claiming, "I'm killing a tyrant." That was his claim. The Democrats, during the Civil War, believed Abraham Lincoln was a tyrant because he deployed the military in order to protect the republic. He caused a war that led to the death of 400,000 Americans in order to protect this republic. And they called him a tyrant for it. Why? Because he was using military force to protect the integrity of the republic. So yeah, that made him a tyrant. So what? Who cares about optics? Our republic is more important than optics. And what does President Trump have to lose at this point? He doesn't have to worry about another election. If there is, this is it. This is the last election he has to worry about. So who cares about optics? So what? Who cares what the media says? Who cares what the Democrats cry about? Who cares if Congress tries to impeach him, if the House tries to impeach him again? They can impeach him 15 times. Look, the Democrats have lost the House, or no, the Senate. They have the House, they lost the Senate. And without the Senate, they can't remove President Trump. So what? So he deploys the military, the media cries, the Democrats in the state cry, "Oh, boo-hoo, you can't do that." The House tries to impeach him, so what? If he saves the republic by doing that, so what? And I'm not talking about Marine Corps or Army. I'm talking about National Guard. Okay? So we understand National Guard operates locally within the United States. Army, Marine Corps, Navy, those all are deployed foreign, right? To deploy Marines within the United States would be equivalent to Caesar crossing the Rubicon, because it's just one of those technicalities that just isn't allowed. So, no, deploy the National Guard. When I say military, I mean National Guard. And who cares about optics? Have them oversee the recounts. And if there is a software glitch that was giving Biden extra votes, the hand recount will catch that. And if we do a recount, again, that's what I'm saying, to deploy the National Guard. Make sure the Democrats aren't magically finding new ballots for Biden. And the only way to do that is to secure those buildings. Put concertina wire around it. The National Guard doesn't have to be inside the building. They just need to be on the outside, securing the perimeter. Making sure nobody's coming in that isn't authorized to enter. And inside that building, you have Democrat and Republican observers observing the poll workers. Anything short of that, I would question the results of the recount. Honestly. Because the Democrats are desperate. They are so desperate, they will do anything to cheat this election. Trump's final option, and again, it's a long shot, but Trump's final option in this election is to hold an additional election in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Because I guarantee you that's where all the fraud happened. It was humiliating to the Democrats when Trump took those states. It was humiliating to them. And I tell you right now, they vowed in 2016 to never let it happen again, and they're following through on that vow right now as we speak. They cannot accept the fact that their quote-unquote blue wall is turning red. It's humiliating to them. Why is the blue wall turning red? Because the Democrats have lied for the past 50 years, and people are finally catching on. Democrats have painted themselves a part of the economy. Hillary Clinton never talked about the economy because she assumed that, again, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, it's all about the economy. And she assumed they were going to go for her anyways, so she never talked about the economy in 2016. And she lost those states. Biden lost those states. But they were able to push through enough fake ballots to swing those states back in his favor. Right? When Biden goes out and vows he's going to end fracking, do you think Pennsylvania is going to be like, oh yeah, that's fine? No. No, Biden lost those states. But the fraud makes it appear like he won them. And if we cannot prove that this fraud happened, there's nothing we can do about it. So again, what are our options at this point? If Trump can definitively prove that there was enough fraud to swing the election, then hold another election. Again, that's a very long shot because as far as I'm aware, that has never happened in U.S. history. I could be wrong. There could be that one-off case where it happened that one time. But as far as I know, that has never happened in U.S. history. A judge has never ruled, you know what, we're just going to redo this election. But if that happens, if a judge rules Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin redo their elections, I guarantee you Trump is going to take those states. Especially if they do it in-person voting, right? If the judge says we're going to redo the election in these 3 states, and they redo it in person, Trump has it 100%, hands down. The Democrats know that, right? The only way you can possibly get a judge to rule to redo the election is if you can prove beyond any doubt that there was enough fraud to swing the results of the election. Again, Biden is sitting 41,000 votes ahead in Pennsylvania. You would have to prove that beyond any doubt, you would have to prove that there were 90 to 100,000 ballots fraudulently cast in Pennsylvania. Because if you prove, I have proof that 30,000 ballots were cast through fraud, the judge would just say, so what? That's not enough to swing the election. There wouldn't be another election. It wouldn't, it's very hard. Again, because I can't think of any time in U.S. history where it's actually happened. Again, I could be wrong, and if you know of an instance in where this has happened, go ahead, leave a comment, tell me. That's fine. I would be very interested in researching. If that has happened in the United States, I would be very interested in looking into that and doing some research into it and seeing, what were the circumstances that caused the judge to rule that we have to do this election again. But as far as I know, it's never happened. But I guarantee you enough fraud has happened this election to justify doing another election and doing it in person. No more of this mail-in BS. In-person voting. Because mail-in voting is how Democrats steal elections. You want the Democrats to steal an election, allow them to do mail-in voting. They're going to ballot harvest. They're going to literally fabricate ballots out of anywhere, and it doesn't matter. Because unless there's someone stopping them from counting those ballots become counted permanently. So, yeah, that's where we're at. Those are Trump's options. So holding another election, very, very unlikely, I would say. I would not say that's... If Trump gets that ruling, and again, it wouldn't happen at the state level. That would have to go up to the Supreme Court. Because the states are going to rule no. Because again, these states are controlled by Democrats. So of course, Democrats are going to run their elections in a way that benefit the Democrats. Even though this is a federal election, this is a presidential election, the elections are still controlled by the states. So Democrats are gonna find ways to hold their states. The states that are run by Democrats are gonna find a way to turn their states blue during a presidential election through whatever means necessary, through fraud or whatever it be. It doesn't always work out because sometimes there are just too many Republicans coming out to vote that they can't stop it. But this year was different because mail-in. It was garbage. This mail-in nonsense was complete garbage. And they talk about, they did mail-in ballots as far back as the Civil War. The only people who were doing mail-in ballots were absentee voters. The key word to an absentee voter is someone who is absent, meaning people who were deployed to war who couldn't walk away from the battlefield and go home and cast a ballot really quick. That's why they allowed them, because of their extenuating circumstances, they allowed them to cast an absentee ballot from the front lines. And of course we still do it today. Deployed military still cast ballots, absentee ballots. But that's the key to that term. Absent. You have to be absent. If you're present in the state, you can't cast an absentee ballot. You're there. Oh, but coronavirus. Boo-hoo. No, don't give me that. Okay? Our republic is more important than the coronavirus. Our republic is more important than getting people sick. I know 400,000 people died in the Civil War to protect this republic. And we can't risk getting sick and having a 99.9% chance of surviving just to go cast a vote. Because, coronavirus? No. Our republic is more important to that. Mail-in voting is a slap in the face to everything this nation stands for. Because it's so rife with fraud. It's an insult to the people who died to protect this nation. It is. I'm not even kidding. It's an insult. It's a joke. It's a way to dismantle our republic. Period. We need to be smart, and we need to never let this happen again. I mean, Trump has very few options this election. I pray, I'm literally praying that they do not get away with their fraud. But if they do, our only option is to make sure they never do this again. If we ever hear them, we should have done it. I knew this was going to happen, by the way. I knew this was going to happen. But if we ever get to this point where we hear them saying, "Oh, let's do mail-in elections again this year," no. Every single conservative in the nation needs to walk to their state capital or write letters to their senators and protest and shut it down. In-person voting, especially for presidential elections. Period. We cannot let this happen again. If you consider yourself a conservative or a patriot, you cannot allow this to happen again, because we're the last line of defense. Democrats don't care. They care about power. They don't care about preserving the republic. They care about power. And to preserve this republic, we have to put a stop to this. I'm just saying it right now. We cannot allow them to continue to do this. This is ridiculous. This is absurd. This is disgusting. That being said, I think I've gone over all of Trump's options. Yeah, software glitch. Oh, the watermarks. So that goes back to holding another election. So I heard about the watermarks. The watermarks, I don't know if it's true or not, but even then, you cannot dismiss the ballots, right? Because if someone gets a ballot and that person doesn't know whether the ballot is watermarked or not, they're going to cast their vote thinking they cast a legitimate vote. And then all of a sudden their vote's discounted, right? Delegitimized because it didn't have a secret watermark that they didn't know it was supposed to have. So, it would be very hard to win a case, to make the case that you need to throw out all the votes that don't have watermarks. That'd be very difficult to make that case. That being said, however, it can be an argument for a re-election, for holding another election. Hey, look, we watermarked these. 80% of the ballots cast in Pennsylvania did not have this watermark. We need to do this election again because those were not valid. That can be an argument for holding a re-election. It can't be an argument for dismissing those votes. Right? I don't see a judge ruling to dismiss those votes because they didn't have a watermark. But I believe it can be an argument for a re-election. And again, if Trump wins the re-election argument, which I don't even think he's making, by the way. That's why I'm saying it's a super long shot. I don't even know if he's even making that argument. But if he does make that argument and he wins that argument, I guarantee you those states are going to go Trump. Right? Especially if it's done in person. No more of this mail-in BS. In person. Then yeah, 100% those states are going Trump. Even if they do mail in and they do a re-election, it's still, I'd say it's going Trump because the Democrats, instead of having several months to implement their fraud, they would have a few weeks. That wouldn't be enough time for them. They wouldn't have enough time to fabricate all these fake ballots. They just wouldn't have the time, and Trump would win. So, oh yeah, one last thing I want to touch on really quick was I saw this hokey article at NBC where they were trying to prove to people how transparent the election is, and they had a Republican and they had a Democrat observing ballots that had already been cast and saying, "See, look, we have oversight in this election." But the thing is, they're looking at ballots that have already been cast, and like I said, looking at ballots that have already been cast don't make a difference. Right? It doesn't make a difference because the ballot has already been cast. Once a ballot has been cast, the only thing you can do is possibly be disqualified because it's improperly marked. But that's not going to catch fraud. The only way to catch fraud is to catch it before the ballot is cast. So you have to watch that poll worker open that envelope and stop him from casting the ballot to stop the fraud. Because once he casts the ballot, it's done. It's permanent. You can't undo it. And when they're blocking poll workers from coming into the building and boarding up the windows, what's to stop these guys from throwing away Trump ballots or tearing them in half and throwing them away? No one's watching them. What's to stop them from opening a ballot and seeing no president has been marked and filling in Biden and then casting it anyways? What's to stop them? They sit there and they cry, democracy dies in darkness, while they board up windows while they count the vote. It's absolute utter hypocrisy. So, yeah, you have to have an observer watching them opening those envelopes, especially in this election, to ensure that in order to prevent fraud. And they weren't allowing that. So this is the most fraudulent election in U.S. history. Hands down, period. I don't care if YouTube wants to censor me for saying that. It's true. And again, I literally pray that they don't get away with it. They haven't gotten away with it yet. I know the media wants you to think they have. They haven't. But Trump doesn't have many options at this point, unfortunately. And all of his options are long shots in reality. But, again, it's not over. The election is not over. So just remember that. The media does not declare the winner. All right. That's all I have for now.